Okay, here we are. This is Craig Wells. I'm going to tell you about what happened to me after I started using Maudy's topical formula. This is a testimony of my free will. I want you to know that over the past few months it's become increasingly more and more difficult to avoid. And I was sure it had to do with having the flu. Sunday, May 14th, was the beginning of 3 days of hell. It became impossible for me to urinate, and finally on Tuesday morning, my wife drove me to the Wyoming County Hospital emergency room in western New York. The staff quickly administered a Foley catheter, and I was relieved of 5 quarts of urine. They then said, "You got to go by ambulance to Strong Memorial Hospital up in Rochester, New York. Strong's has the outstanding ability with emergency cases such as mine." I arrived about midnight, and by the time I got settled in, I had renal shutdown, a mild heart attack, an enlarged prostate, a fever, and a Foley catheter. I'm telling you, I was a mess. The next day was spent trying to get me to get stable, but it just wasn't happening. It was to no avail, and I was therefore scheduled for surgery. The operation left me with bladder sores and bleeding. So for the next 10 days, I was in intensive care unit, checked every 2 to 4 hours for vital signs, and they flushed my kidneys and the bladder day and night with sodium hydroxide, and I was supposed to have died when I was on the operating table several times. And they brought me back. I had 3 blood transfusions, and all I can say is by the grace of God, I lived through it. I lived through it all, and I ended up going home with the catheter and a lot of prescriptions. My next appointment with the urologist, Dr. Robert Davis, at the University of Rochester Medical School, resulted in removing the catheter, but with no luck getting the voiding to work. It just did not work. We next scheduled a biopsy of the prostate. The urologist, Dr. Davis, took 12 specimens, and the results were, as he said, "You're an A student, 12 for 12, positive." Of course, positive meant I had cancer, it had metastasized, and on the Gleason scale of 1 to 10, where you try to be somewhere around 4 or 5, it was close to 9 and some of them more. He said this was extremely serious, Craig. Clearly the tumor had surrounded the prostate. It had metastasized, and hopefully it hadn't gone anywhere. However, wrong. It was wrong. After CAT scans, bone scans, and x-rays, it was clear that the cancer had spread everywhere, including the bones, the lymph nodes, all through my body. My wife and I visited the family practitioner that I went to. He read the reports, and we were told by him to get our affairs in order, get Carol Lee, my wife, get her a power of attorney, and to say goodbye to my family and friends, as I'd probably not even make it for another month or 2. It was at this point in time that I called my friend Patrick Kennedy. I said, "Pat, I got a serious problem here." And he said, my brother John Wayne Kennedy has been researching a potential cancer treatment for the past 10 plus years. And although it was experimental and not registered by the FDA, that he would send me the formula ASAP. And he said, "I think you may have a chance of helping you out." I received the topical cream and began treatment soon after. I signed an informed consent agreement because they do not charge for the formula or their time in the follow-ups. As per the directions, I applied the formula twice daily to my prostate area. I did not have a great deal of confidence in the result, and the Kennedys were cautious not to raise my hopes too high. So, guess what? I scheduled a second opinion in Florida with a group of medical doctors down there in the Sarasota area. I bought a one-way ticket because I really did not expect to make it home to our farm in western New York. The Florida urology group ordered a multitude of tests, including blood samples to check the PSA, some scans, and then see what we can go do from there. I actually was running at 600, 700, and the last test I had on the PSA, it was 831 out of a possible 1,000 scale. I mean, I was just playing off the charts. Dr. William Tingle, my urologist in Florida, recommended bone strengtheners and to continue receiving hormone treatment. I didn't mention the formula or any of my cream treatments to him. I was still carrying my urine bag and began to notice that the urine had developed a cloudy white aspect to it. I ran out of the formula and I noticed that the cloudy substance no longer appeared. Pat introduced me to a knowledgeable Mahdi associate, Scott McFarlane, who works with the Kennedys to advance the formula, and 2 days later I received more cream. After an application, the cloudy substance began again, and it was obvious to me that the cream was working. Several days later, I was scheduled for a new PSA test at the cancer lab at the Sarasota Memorial Hospital. To everyone's surprise, especially my own, the test came back at 46. Now remember, it was 831. 2 weeks later, it's back at 46. I haven't had chemotherapy, I didn't have radiation, and of course I didn't have any kind of radical surgery for cancer removal. During the next 2-week period, I noticed that over 30 small red spots appeared all over different parts of my body. I asked Pat if he knew what they were, and he said to treat them as if they are and probably were cancer markers. I treated them, they got bigger. They crusted over, and several contained small nodules at the bottom. These scabs then came off easily, and once they were removed, my skin cleared up and it left no marks. Really was fascinated. Now everything had changed. My life expectancy had jumped from months to 1 to 2 years or even more, and everyone except the Kennedys were wondering what in the world is going on with Craig Wells. I had told the first doctor that I was going to try a topical paste that was a combination of minerals, no chemicals, minerals, and that was generally regarded as safe, and he just kind of shook his head, patted me on the shoulder, and walked away. I never mentioned it to the Florida doctors, as none of them seemed to have any interest in the formula. I was released due to my new readings, and I went to the airport to stand by. I bought a ticket on the airplane to return flight, and as you know, I didn't have a return flight, and I flew back home to my wife and my farm in western New York. I continued on with the formula twice a day, and recently, the first week in September, I went to the oncologist, radiologist at Strong's Memorial Hospital, and guess what? The PSA is now down between 5 to 7. The bone cancer is in remission, hasn't gone anywhere, along with no signs of cancer in the lymph nodes, lungs, organs, or the blood. The doctors in New York have no explanation of how this cure was managed, and of course the question is, how in the world could this happen? I was saturated with lethal cancer cells everywhere. I had no chemo, I had no radiation or operation, and now they're gone. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Scott, and especially John Kennedy, from the bottom of my heart. I am considering a plan to start a foundation to further John Kennedy's research and to start this formula on a path to FDA approvals. I am living testimony to this formula's effectiveness, and I believe that anyone who can help should help. Sincerely, and thank you very much again. This is Craig Franklin Wells speaking.